So in the last two installments of our discussion, first we took a look at why math is a life skill. And in the second one, we were looking at how QMath is the best math learning program out there, which delivers a better and faster learning of mathematical thinking and math concepts both. Now, this discussion that we're going to have now will focus on how do you use those two pieces of information and deliver an effective QMath experience session. In fact, any conversation can be structured using this particular method. So let's take a look at it. So let me ask you a question. Have you ever been to a doctor?
Yes, quite a few times.
Right. So for making it easier for you to remember this structure, we'll take the discussion between the doctor and patient as an example and see how the conversation can be modeled after that interaction, right? So let's say you have a headache and you go to a doctor. What's the first thing you expect from the doctor?
I expect the doctor to ask me my problem and then ask me for how long the problem has been there and other things, maybe do I have it in my family kind of questions, and then prescribe me a medicine according to that.
Alright, let's see how it is. Let me be the doctor and you can be the patient. Let's say you walked into my office.
Hello doctor, I have headache for quite a few time now.
It's okay, headaches are very normal. You know what? Take a Saradon, drink a lot of water and you'll be okay.
Okay.
Now, let's say if this is the conversation your doctor had with you, how comfortable are you going back to this doctor?
I don't think I'm ever going back to that same doctor.
What are the chances of you referring somebody to this doctor?
Never.
Why?
Because the doctor didn't ask me enough questions to know my problem.
Oh, right. So basically what you're looking at is the doctor did not spend enough time understanding your problem and you think he just prescribed a random medicine. But what if I tell you this is the best doctor in town and knows everything just by looking at the face of the patient?
Well, still I would like the doctor to ask me questions even if I have some common problem like others, but I would want it to be more customized for me maybe.
See, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Even in a QMath experience session, when a parent comes to you to listen to the QMath program in detail and to see how this program helps his or her son or daughter, they don't expect you to straight away start talking about the QMath program. They'd expect you to first understand what their learning requirements are, what their expectations are, ask a few questions to see what the child's current standing is, and then talk about how will you handle the problem in general, then about the QMath program. Even in a CES session, your conversation will follow the same flow. Now, I have a question for you. What do you ask this phase when the doctor is asking you a lot of questions to understand your problem?
I think I'll call it a diagnosing phase.
You call it diagnose, right?
Okay.
The doctor asks a lot of questions, and if he's not able to figure out what the problem is based on the questions, then he probably will prescribe a test. After that, usually what I observed is doctors try and explain you why this problem occurred, right? For example, you might have sinus problem, or you might have migraine, or it could be because of the eyesight issues, or it could be just because you didn't have enough sleep or you're not hydrated enough. Whatever the reason is, the doctor will first explain the reason for it, and once they explain the reason, then they will prescribe whatever medicine you would require. This is exactly the flow that a CES structure would follow. The first thing that you should do as a teacher when a parent comes to talk to you is diagnose what are the students' learning requirements and also understand the parents' expectations from this program. Then stage, essentially the phase where you're explaining to the parent as to why those learning gaps have occurred or what the student would require to learn better. And lastly, you talk about QMath learning program in a way it is tailored to the requirements of the student and the parent. Also remember that there are these certain strategies that you can employ, and using these strategies is going to make your delivery of the QMath experience session more powerful and more personalized to the student and the parents. Number one is, like you expected, customize the whole conversation to the parents' expectations and the students' learning requirements. You can use the diagnose, stage, pitch format that we just spoke about for it. The second one is, when you're explaining the QMath program, always use all the material, show the math box, show the workbooks, tablets and the puzzle cards. Use this specific technique called show and tell so that the parent and the student can experience them. Lastly, once you're done with your conversation, once you have created a great learning plan for the child, use the EAR model, or as we call it, EAR model, to respond to parent queries. See, the best way to respond to anybody's questions is by actively listening to them, and that's why EAR is very easy to remember. You explore what their actual question is, acknowledge the concerns that they have explained to you, and finally respond to them. And using confidence and of course the right solutions from QMath program and QMath methods, right? Let's take a look at diagnose now. In diagnosis, the first thing you just have to do is personalize the QMath experience by asking first specific questions. And this is because this is about math learning. All your questions are about math learning. For example, how's your child's relationship with math? Or does your child like mathematics? And then you dig deeper by asking how much does he score, and do they do their homework on their own, do they participate in competitive exams, and also generic questions about the behaviors. For example, do you notice a lot of silly mistakes, etc. Now, once you ask these questions, it becomes fairly easy for you to understand the child's learning requirements. And for the ease of handling that particular student requirements, we have categorized the student personas into 3 types. One persona is the one who loves mathematics and who's doing already well in school and beyond. Another is somebody who does not hate or love mathematics, slightly indifferent to the whole subject, and does okay but not great at this point of time. And third is someone who hates or fears mathematics, who have trouble with the learning process of mathematics. Now, based on these personas, we've also identified the generic behaviors that are described by the parents. In a way, these are labels that the parents use for these kind of student personas. For example, if you identify that somebody has fear of math, you'd hear a lot from the parents saying, oh, he's usually skeptical about doing his homework, his mother helps him a lot, or my son or daughter feel a lot anxious before the exams and they spend the whole night. I see them visibly worried about this whole program. And you can also justify it using the school performance, where you notice that their score range is lower than the average of the class. Use these personas, and using these personas you have to customize the whole conversation. Now, once you know a child is interested in mathematics or loves mathematics, you would know how to pitch the product. Once you know how a child has hatred towards mathematics or has math anxiety, you would know how to customize this conversation. And for the ease of it, my recommendation is, if you're dealing with somebody who loves mathematics, start with talking about how you can challenge them. That is your stage process. We'll talk more about stage in a bit, and move into the conversation. Now, let's say based on this initial conversation, based on the parents' descriptors, you're unable to get to a conclusion of what the child's affinity to mathematics is. Then you will do a simple lab test, right? Say, for example, when the doctor asks you questions and he's not able to conclude what happened, he would ask you to go to a lab test, right? What kind of lab test do you know?
Blood tests.
Blood tests.
Scans,
etc. Now, similarly, we have a single test that you can do. What we call it is the QMath diagnostic test. Has about 20 questions. 10 questions test the ability, 10 questions test the knowledge, which is customized for each grade. Now, the scores will tell you how well the student is doing. If the score range is about 14, but let's say below 16, then you know that the child needs some help. And if the score range is above 16, the child is doing okay in mathematics. The score range is below 14, you know that the child needs support in both knowledge and ability. Now, you can also read specific detailed reports for knowledge and ability, share it with the parent. But once you know the student persona, the next thing you should do is explain what can we do to help this persona. Number one, explain where does this problem come from. For instance, if somebody fears math, we've already spoken about the math life cycle earlier in our first conversation. Bring up that information and see how the drills kill the affinity to or love towards mathematics and slow down the child. Let's say if the child is doing already well, and how the broadcast method of teaching in school systems slowing down their pace of learning and how they're not challenged enough, etc. And then move into specific conversation of how QMath program is going to help. Now, this is where you pitch how we are going to accelerate the learning process for any child by personalizing the whole program for them. Now, this is where I have a very quick technique or rule that I use. If I have a student who loves mathematics, when I'm explaining about the program to the parent, I start with talking about the puzzle cards. I explain how puzzle cards help improve creative thinking and how they challenge because they are built based on the difficulty level of the child's solving capability of the previous cards. Secondly, I'll talk about tablets. how we are improving aptitude skills, improving speed and accuracy, how they provide immediate feedback. And then I come to talking about the workbooks, where I speak about how these are self-paced and we use target setting to accelerate the learning of the child. Now, if you see the whole process, I carefully chose which QMath learning system element that I'm talking about first, and then gradually moving into the last one and explaining how this program is going to help the child. Similarly, if somebody has fear of math, my sequence is workbooks, how they are self-paced, how they can be customized so that the child improves from where they have started. Aptitude, how it is gamified, how it is fun to learn, and how it improves performance with slight pressure because they're timed, and how the immediate feedback helps. Then I talk about puzzle cards, how these puzzle cards are going to help with unstructured time by reducing anxiety, etc. So this way you should customize the whole conversation. Once you identified what is a student persona, once you customize the whole conversation, the last part of your entire conversation is going to be about how will you help the child. You create a learning plan. Now, if you haven't already understood how to create a learning plan, we have a quick learning course on this. You can take the learning course. But broadly, the learning plan will be for a span of 0 to 12 months. And the areas 1 and 2 talk about a series of mathematical topics that you will cover for the child. And the area 3 is usually about behavioral aspects. Somebody's making silly mistakes or somebody has fear of mathematics. And this way, you create a customized learning plan and make sure the parent understands the value in the math program. There's an entire CES PowerPoint presentation slide deck that you can use to drive this conversation, which we can share with you shortly. Right, so to very quickly to summarize what we discussed, 1, you should customize the CES conversation to make student learning requirements and parent expectations as the priority in your whole conversation. Use diagnose, stage and pitch for a structured and customized discussion. Most importantly, make sure that you're showing all the QMath learning system elements that you are talking about, and ensure that this learning plan that you're creating at the end is designed for that child's requirements, right? So with that, we will close how a QMath experience session is delivered, but we'll have one more conversation on how to effectively handle parent queries if there are any.